Perfect. Looks like we are live now. So, hi again, Amy. Hi, everyone who is
Hello,
joining
Jennifer.
us. So excited to have you here today. And before I formally introduce you, I'm going to give a moment for people to log on and join us. As y'all join us, please pop a comment. I see we have our first comment from Pet Partner Smiling, letting us know we're live. So we're off to a good start.
All right.
But all of our viewers, just let us know your name, where you're joining from. We all could use some positive energy right now. So a fun fact about your animal if you have one. We want this to be really conversational. And as y'all learn more about Amy and the wonderful work that she does, I think you're going to have a lot of questions. So we'll be inviting you to pop those in as well throughout so that I can ask them. I see we have some hellos coming in. We have Colleen from Texas, so Julia from Virginia.
Okay.
So we have some animal lovers, and
Yay.
wow, here they all come
I
in.
see them.
Perfect. All right. So I'm going
Yeah.
to go ahead and introduce you, let our audience know a little bit more about you, Amy.
Okay.
So Amy's developed and directs the online Animal Assisted Intervention Certificate Program and is the director of its Center for Human and Animal Interventions at Oakland University in Michigan. She also founded and directs the nonprofit Teachers Pets, Dogs and Kids Learning Together, which pairs youth with hard to adopt shelter dogs to benefit both. So we'll be talking more about that program today. I know we'll probably have a lot of questions about that. Amy's published journal articles in peer reviewed journals. She's co authored 5 book chapters, has presented nationally and internationally on the topic of AAI, and her main areas of research relate back to protecting animal welfare. So that will be something that we touch on today, too. Amy's also a licensed professional counselor, so she is a professional who incorporates animals into her work and is a certified dog trainer. So, as you're all joining us, I think we have plenty of areas of expertise represented. Amy, thank you so much for
Thank
being here
you.
today.
Thank you. I'm super excited.
Good, good. Well, I would love to get started by just you talking to us about how you got started in this field, what motivated you, and just your love for animals to relate to everyone as we get started on that.
Sure. Yeah. I was going to say, I think that most of us get started in this field because of our love for animals. And especially as kids, a lot of times our pets are our first friends or our favorite friends. Um, but back in 2000-ish, I was working for a large humane society here in Michigan, and I worked with their pet behavior department. And when we were doing training and behavior related stuff for dogs and cats, we started talking about ways that we could incorporate kids and dogs together. So I called basically every group that had anything to do with kids and dogs in the country and in Canada. And then I spent a week out in Oregon with Project Pooch. They are a similar organization where they have a juvenile detention facility and they worked with rescue dogs. So I studied there for a little bit. And as much as I wanted to incorporate therapy dogs in the practice with the youth that I was working with in the detention facilities and in the alternative schools, it was difficult because you all treat your dogs very well. And dogs that have their own beds and they have their own toys and they have all of their own they're very loved beings. And a
Right.
lot of the kids do not. Some of the kids don't have their own beds. A lot of the kids don't have things that we kind of take for granted. So by pairing them with dogs in the shelter, it was a way for them to kind of connect. So, you have dogs that are locked up in the shelter, you have dogs that are unwanted or feel unwanted
Mhm.
or have abuse history, and the kids could really relate. So being able to connect those two together and bring those commonalities together made more sense for the program. So we started that around 2005. And then about that same time, I started at Oakland University, and we had a really supportive and innovative dean at that time. So when I told her what I wanted to do with the nonprofit, she immediately made comments like, we need to do research on this, and we need to develop a train the trainer program so that other people can learn how to do this. So that started back around 2005, 2006, and we received a grant from the university for $30,000 to get us started, so that we were able to start our first online certificate program back then. And it's just continuing to grow and evolve. And I've met some super fantastic people, many that many come from your organization, and just being able to partner and work together and do research together and writing together and teaching together and presenting together has evolved over that last 15 years.
Wow. Yeah, that's such a great testimony for this field and for how important it is to be innovative and to connect. We've been really fortunate to learn from Amy and to be able to connect a lot of people who need more education in this space your way. So that's wonderful. So we in your introduction, it's clear that you wear a lot of different hats.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to see if you might be able to walk us through just a day in the life. What does your day to day look like? As you do all these different things.
Sure. Every day is a little bit different, I'll say, but a lot of them are kind of the same. I teach the online program, so Melissa Winkle and I are teaching that together. So we spend a lot of our days, working through that, grading papers, working with students, connecting, and then we also work on a lot of projects together. So we're doing a lot of writing, a lot of researching. I spend a couple days a week out at the facility, one of the detention facilities with the youth that I'll talk about in that program later. But I spend a couple days out there working with the youth and the shelter dogs, and then I spend a couple hours at the shelter weekly, where I work with the volunteers and I teach them how to do basic dog training so that the dogs there can become more adoptable. Also working with the APA, American Psychological Association, their human animal intervention or interaction section. I'm on their competencies and ethics board, so we write a lot of, well, you're on the board too, so I see you monthly. But we're able to do some good work there, publishing, and we have a lot of great people on our subcommittee, so we work on what do we want to get out there, what kinds of position statements, what kind of competencies, what ethics, what needs to be out there. And dog welfare or animal welfare in general is a very important topic there. So and then I also am a licensed professional counselor, so I spend a couple of nights a week at my private practice. And my dog Bentley does come with me on occasion, and he's really not, I call him the office manager because he's not quite, he wouldn't pass the evaluation, but he does like to greet the guests that come in, the clients that come in, and he just likes to get out. And sometimes it has been very, opportunities have come about where he has been able to teach my clients things like patience and how to have impulse control, because don't touch him when you're flapping like that or whatever. Mm-hmm. So it's been it's a lot. And for a while I was at the shelter working with some inmate workers, so we were doing some education programming there where the inmates were able to, they came every day anyway to do shelter cleaning, kennel cleaning, and they were not doing the best job. I mean, they felt kind of underappreciated. They just had to clean kennels, and they didn't get to interact with the dogs much. So we spent a couple days a week there teaching them same thing, positive reinforcement training, dog body language, ways that they can engage with the dogs and hopefully get the dogs better acclimated to in-home living. And that program was really, really great as they evolved and became better at their job, and they started to appreciate dogs more. And that's really kind of my secret mission in life is to, I mentioned the octopus teacher earlier to you, Taylor, and how sometimes we don't look at animals as loving and sentient or feeling in any way, or that they may be social or not social. We don't really think about it. We just think we're humans and we're up here on the chain, and it's our decision to do what we want with them, and allowing people to see them in a different light and to see them as sentient beings and how they respond better. And then when you treat them a certain way and when you reward behaviors that you want instead of punishing behaviors that you don't, how the dog trusts you more and how the dog interacts with you more, and to watch those aha moments. And one of the inmates, as he was getting ready to leave, one day made a comment like that he didn't buy into it initially. He felt like dogs needed to be punished sometimes and whatnot. But he said as he went through and he saw how the dogs responded to him, and it was very motivating for him, and that he was going to try it on his children, which I thought was quite a testament too. So
Yeah, that's really powerful. It is, there's so much that we can learn from the human animal interaction. And I love that for everyone who's joining us today, there's something that you can relate to with Amy's experience. Because I love that you do the hands on training, that you visit, that you help other people understand the importance of positive training methodologies. And then you take all of those knowledges on a level to inform practice at higher level, inform competencies, and we're really fortunate that you still have your hands in those direct experiences that to bring that voice as we push the field forward. So you did mention that the prison-based rescue program, so fascinating to me. My therapy dogs used to visit in the Department of Juvenile Justice in Georgia, and just some of the most amazing visits I've ever been on. So I would love for you to tell us more about that, how that program is structured.
sure, absolutely. We run the program for 10 weeks. So we operate 2 hours a day, 2 days a week. For the 10 weeks. And the first hour is like an educational hour. So they learn how to read dog body language, signs of stress in dogs, how shelter dogs differ from owned dogs, how to interact, positive reinforcement training, um, even myths about pit bulls, things like that. And then they spend the second hour training their dogs. So the dogs come from rescue. So they're transported to the facility, and they spend the hour with them, and they do all kinds of training. So like yesterday, we had some of the dogs, they could barely learn focus. They were super unfocused. So they were doing focus. And then other kids had dogs that were able to do spin and jump up on a chair and sit and high five. And, every dog is different and every kid is different. So we always go where the kids are and where the dogs are. But also during the educational component, we have the kids do what we call like a check-in. So it's like a question of the day. So if you were a dog breed today, what would you be and why? If you were a color today, what would you be and why? And it provides us a little insight into kind of how they are feeling that day, but they don't have to say, I'm feeling scared, I'm feeling sad. They can say, if I were a color, I'd be black because I feel unhappy and it's dark. Or some of the creative ones, they're like, if they're a food, a kid was like, I feel like I would be a burrito today because it seems really good on the outside, but it's a mistake later down the road or
Wow,
something. Just those really
that's
creative
funny.
things. So we just try to create that type of openness, the same
Mhm.
that the dogs can do, bring in that unconditional aspect. So the program is 10 weeks, and they get the first dog for 5 weeks. So if there's
Okay.
10 kids, we'd have 5 dogs. If there's 8 kids, 4 dogs, that kind of
Okay.
thing. Um, and then after 5 weeks, then another dog comes in. And some people will argue, like, why would you keep the dog for 5 weeks? And the dogs, they should be able to be adopted. And we do allow for that. But the dogs that we select are the dogs that are harder to adopt. So typically those
Mhm.
dogs sit there anyway. So,
Right.
in our shelters, and I don't know, I imagine they're similar in your shelters in the area, but pit bulls make up a vast majority of the dogs that are in rescue. And they take a long time. So our average length of stay for a pit bull is 37 days in our county shelter.
Wow.
But there are many, many, many that are there even longer. We have some going on 300 days, 400 days, which is heartbreaking, and it's very uh, deteriorating for them. The dogs
Sure.
need to have enrichment, and volunteers can only do so much. So by having that 5 weeks, or even if they need the 10 weeks because they're still at the shelter, they get an opportunity to get out of the shelter and
Mhm.
to get some enrichment and get some training and not have to just stare at the same walls all day, every
Yeah.
day. And they really do love it. Like they start out the first day kind of hesitant to get in the van because a lot of them came from animal control, so
Mhm.
they're not so sure. But after they have been with the kids a day or two, they're like jumping in the van. They can't wait to get there. They know who their kids are. Immediately as soon as they walk up, they sit because they know, oh, I see your treat bag on. And but we like to focus on uh, empathy, perspective taking for the youth. That's
Mhm.
kind of what we found. We did a study through the NIH in 2012, 13 ish. And we had 138 residents go through that. And those were the themes. While we were saying we want to focus on empathy and perspective taking, and decreasing internalizing symptoms and externalizing symptoms. We found that the themes that permeated from the kids that participated were that they had more patience, that they had a better sense of hope, which, as counselors, that's what we are, dispensers of hope,
Yeah.
ideally, and their perseverance. So a lot of times at-risk youth want to give up and quit when it gets hard, so they don't tend to stick things out. But in this case, they had a vested interest because they were doing the training, and if the dogs weren't being trained, they weren't getting adopted. So they had a separate interest. So that perseverance, and then the desire to contribute in their communities.
Mm.
So they would want to come back
Wow.
and do adoption events, or they would want to, can I come back and train? Can I work at the shelter? Can I somehow participate in this a little more? And at the same time, the dogs are able to be more adopted. So we do things like if a dog is under socialized, and the dog is not going to learn sit down, spin, jump on a chair, and say
Right.
hi. The dog needs to know that all men are not bad, or that humans come with a good quality as well. So sometimes the kids like, here's your job. Your job is to sit there and toss treats on the ground until the dog's comfortable enough to sit with you. And
Mm-hmm.
then when he sits with you, then, we always take the lead from the dog. And other kids, like I said, the dogs are turning on light switches and whatnot. But we focus mostly on behaviors that will help get them adopted. So potential adopters want dogs that are affiliative, who will
Mm-hmm.
approach. They want dogs that will come when they're called, that can walk nicely on a leash, and that just show basic sit, the ability that they can learn cues and not jumping on people. So we work a lot on those troubleshooting
Yeah.
behaviors that are less than desirable, and focusing on behaviors that we want to see repeated.
What a great program, because it really does benefit both ends. You have the opportunity for kids to learn. Marcy commented earlier and said she believes that we are educators every time we're on a visit in the therapy animal world. And so in this application of the human animal bond, the same is true. And you also bring up a great point about making animals more adoptable. There's leading into our next question. I would never worry about any animal who ends up in your care, given your commitment to animal welfare and to teaching us what that looks like. I think it sounds good. We all say, yeah, of course we're committed to animal welfare. But can you talk to us more about determining an animal's suitability, whether it be for a therapy animal program or a program more like yours, recognizing an animal's preferences and just keeping those body language considerations at the front and center of everything that we do?
Yeah, 100%. One of well, whether the competencies are coming from ACA, American Counseling Association. I know Pet Partners adapted a version of those, which was great because they apply as well there with your organization. And APA has a set of competencies, and occupational therapy is coming up with competencies, nursing's coming up with competencies, and all across the board, that knowledge of behavior, animal behavior at this species, breed, and individual level is common. That's all across the board. So there's a big push for, and I know that, again, Pet Partners does a really nice job making sure that your handlers have an opportunity to take education, continuing education classes, ways that they can learn these things. But there's other opportunities too, where having a very, I don't, a very strong knowledge of not just your dog, but dog behavior in general. So sometimes what we do, and we find, and this happens repeatedly in our coursework through the animal assisted therapy program, we do a section related to identifying signs of stress in dogs. And people will say up front, oh, my dogs love it. They love visits. They love doing it. They are so happy with it. And then we ask them to take a video of a session. And sometimes when they watch the video, they're surprised, and they say, oh
Wow.
my gosh, I had no idea that my dog was lip licking so many times. I had no idea that my dog kept checking in with me as often as he did. I had no idea, that my dog's tail was tucked under when that person approached so quickly.
Wow. Yeah.
So these are things, it doesn't mean that the animal is not suitable.
Sure.
Everything is situational, but being well versed in dog body language, again, species, breed, and your particular dog, is so critical. And there are some really great educational courses and pieces out there to learn just that. Not to be a dog trainer,
Right.
not to say that you have to have a whole second career, but just to know that you can recognize those signs of stress before it gets to distress.
Mm-hmm.
They're very simple. And if we're breaking it down into the most simplistic part of the interaction, is the dog doing it willingly? Is the
Mm-hmm.
dog, my dog, again, Bentley, not necessarily a therapy dog, but he runs to the office door. He
Mm-hmm.
knows exactly where the office is. He runs in every time a person approaches. He runs to the door. Like he is showing me in his behavior that he wants to be there in the office with me, but not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily with some people. He'll walk over and lay at their feet. Other people he'll lay in another part of the room, but recognizing and doing something about that. So we see sometimes things like, and I'm I mean this, like, I think there's no malintent. So I
Sure.
am 100% convinced that every single person who is a handler or who does any type of work with animals, we do it because we love the animals. And the last
Yeah.
thing we would ever want is to exploit them or coerce them in any way, though it does happen sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there's a child who, the child really wants to see the dog and is, please, please, please let me see the dog, but something about that child is intimidating. Maybe he's moving too quickly, or
Mm-hmm.
he's standing over the dog, or he's reaching out with his fingers in his face, and the dog is not comfortable, and the dog will kind of cower, or try to get behind the legs of the handler. And we don't want to hurt the child's feelings, so we do
Right.
things like, come on, let's go, and we pull the leash, or we kind of use their collar to push them forward. And that's always the biggest dilemma. How do you navigate that? And that's why it's so important that as handlers in people who do this type of work, any type of AAI work, that we, I think your acronym is YAYABA, right?
That's it. Yep.
You're your animal's best advocate, and really you're their only advocate. So being able to navigate that, and it's hard, because how do you tell a kid who feels rejected, and here's another being that's going to reject them or perceptually reject them? But that's where having the education and knowing, okay, how do I navigate that? How can I turn this back into a session of meaning? So maybe the dog doesn't want to approach that child for that reason, but could that be an opportunity to say, especially if you're working with a professional, or if you're working in that AAT setting, that you can say, like, oh, let's hold on a second, let's look at, what do you notice about
Mm-hmm.
Copper? What's Copper doing? What are Copper's, and we can bring it back to the here and now, and we can always take a step back. Or oh, how do you think, we know when dogs' ears are back, they're a little bit nervous. Do you ever feel nervous? And, oh, I do feel nervous. Well, what helps you feel less nervous? Well, it helps me when this happens. Well, let's try that with Copper. Let's see if we sit down, if maybe Copper will want to approach. And knowing how to navigate that and do it in a way that is, again, advocating for our dog, but also not, I don't want to say disappointing, because sometimes it is
Right.
disappointing, but not every interaction is, possible.
Right. Yeah. Well, and you can do it in a way that raises awareness, that provides education. So always really powerful. And you touch on such a hard thing for all of us. I mean, anyone who is joining us today, or anyone who has done this work, knows how difficult it can be. We talk about wearing a lot of hats. If you're handling an animal and there's an expectation that people are going to visit with them, you want to please everyone. You want to be there for your animal. So it requires so much education and awareness. And I think back to when I was first getting started. I think I have to tell people I pushed my dog too far. There was a point at which he was like, I'm done. And I thought, no, you love it. We'll just take a little break. And, I didn't mean to, but in that way, I wish I had known then what I know now, and monitoring him, and making sure it's something that he's not just tolerating, but that he really enjoys. And by being in tune to body language, and raising our levels of education on that, that's how we do that. So I'd love to also bring up, we talked earlier before we were getting started. It's a tough week in this world, and so our last two
Yeah.
questions, we want to really just bring up the energy and talk about some exciting things that you've seen, some moving testimonies that you've seen. And I also want to say as well to anyone who's joining us, as we hear these testimonies, if there are questions that you have or experiences that you'd like to share, put them in the comments box, and I'm keeping my eye out as they load, so we can ask Amy before wrapping up today. So yeah, tell us about one or two of the greatest moments you've ever had working on the human-animal interaction space.
Sure, absolutely. And I was thinking about this ahead of time, and we've had more than 2,000 students go through, residents go through our program, so they all kind of have their own little specialness to them. But the one that I would say has really embedded itself in my soul, if you will, was at one point, instead of bringing the dogs to the detention facility, we brought the kids to the shelter. And that was my favorite. I think that worked out the best for us, but we had the space. We had a whole basement area that was ours, and we had a lot of space to move around and whatnot. And it provided the kids an opportunity to see the dogs in that environment, and we were able to do other work. But aside from that, it was a group of girls. We had 8 girls that we were working with, and one of the girls came to group, and she was probably 15, I think 15 years old ish, but kind of an angry, one of those like angry teens, like the arms like this all the time, and
Yeah.
really had that struggle. And I've always worked with boys. I've always worked with the males in detention, so girls were a little bit intimidating to me. But we worked through it together, and maybe it was the second week of our program. We had this dog. It was a foxhound, and the dog's name was Missy. And foxhounds, we get a lot of hounds in our area because, like, just maybe an hour north of the shelter there's a lot of like hunting in rural areas, and dogs get lost. Hound dogs get lost. They are not good hunting dogs, so they get left behind. They get chained up to the shelter to be somebody else's problem. It's just so we get a lot of hounds as well. So this particular hound dog was in the shelter, and so the kennels are like 5 by 10 maybe. So they're not big. There's not a whole lot of room beyond just spinning in a circle. So that's what she was doing. And a lot of times dogs that are experiencing distress in the kennel will do that. They'll spin, or they do these like vertical leaps. And she had what was called happy tail. So it's like when their whole body just like it goes all the time, and their tail hits the bars, their tail hits the walls, and it will break open the skin. Mm-hmm. So then it bleeds, and the blood's everywhere. So the staff had asked if we would work with her. So I kind of told her story, and I asked any of the girls if they wanted to work with Missy. And immediately the angry girl raised her hand, and she said, "I do." And I said, "Okay." So I kind of gave her the story. I had her, work with her separately. And she got really interested in the dog. So she's reading, she went to the shelter and just took all the brochures off the wall, and she was reading everything she could about the dogs. And there was a picture, and I think you have it somewhere, of her with her dog. And this was after one of the days of training, and it was far in the yard, and she didn't know I was taking the picture. But that was like 10 years ago, and it will still make me cry to this day. But she and the dog just had this connection, this patience with each other, where they kind of understood and got each other. And right away they did. And at the end of our 10 weeks, she wrote a letter to me, and it was like 6 pages long. And the letter basically described her life. I'm going to have a hard time, but it described her life, and how from the time she was 6 years old, she had to fend for herself, and her mom had an alcohol issue, and she was raped repeatedly by uncles and stepdads and whatnot. And she had to have a hysterectomy at 16 because there was no one, or at 14 because nobody was there to protect her. And she wrote, and that was part of it, was that all of these things happened to her because she had no one to look out for her. That was her thought. That's what she believed, was that she had to just accept what the world doled out to her because there was nobody to step in. And she said, but spending that time working with her dog showed her that she was capable of doing so much more. And she said, I realized that I don't need somebody to do things for me, that I can do them for myself, and I can take care of myself. And she said her mom had given up guardianship. So she said, now Missy and I are both in a place where we're looking for a home, and I think we're both better prepared to get into a home. And it just, like, wow. That one was just, like, it stinks. And still, all these years later, I still, that wow. one's in there.
Yeah, that is a really, really powerful testimony. And, the way that interacting with animals, and not even animals who are our own pets. Whether it be an animal coming for a brief therapy animal visit or an animal who you train in a program like this, for a matter of weeks. That connection can teach us so much about who we are as humans, and can give such hope. And I just don't really know of anything else in the world, and maybe I'm biased, but I don't know of anything else in the world that can do that in this way. So I'm really thankful that you had that program there and that you were able to make such an impact. I'm sure that's just one of a million stories. So I see a lot of people are commenting. Colleen says, "What a wonderfully powerful story. Thank you for sharing." And we have some hearts coming up, so it definitely is resonating. Last thing, and but unless anyone has questions, and I'm still keeping my eye out for those. We said this has been a hard week. It's been a hard year. And so the
Yeah.
people who are joining us today have really, in a lot of ways, if they're therapy animal handlers, there's been this struggle. The thing that we do to connect with our community, to share our love, has been put on hold. Some really brilliant and incredibly powerful things have come of that, from virtual visits, window visits. These people are not giving up. But I just wanted to ask you to share a word of encouragement to all these people, whether you're a therapy animal handler or an animal lover, just about the passion that you have to be here joining us for a talk like this today.
Oh, absolutely. I feel your pain. We were out of commission for several months. Starting March, like everyone else. So from March until probably July, I think. Well, maybe June or July, we were able to go back. But there's a part of your soul that's missing. There's a piece of you, like what you feel is your, and I imagine all of you feel the same way, that's kind of your purpose. That's your mission in life, is to share, whether it's sharing joy through a visit or allowing somebody to feel like you had mentioned earlier. The dogs don't have to be our own, or animals don't have to be our own to experience that. But I think sometimes it's a little more powerful because these dogs don't have to like you. They don't have to love you. They don't have to want to interact with you. So to have, I mean, there's a meme that's going around Facebook, and it says like something about, it's like a smile, like this smiley face, smug face. I don't know, but it's like, when you're at a party and the dog chooses you out of everybody else in the room, like that feeling of like, yes,
Yes. Yeah.
it's really powerful. It makes us feel really good. And I think that when we don't have that opportunity to share that joy and to experience that joy together with other people, it is very disheartening. And I know that there are a lot of groups and Facebook groups and other resources where people can get together and kind of share and inspire each other. And you talked about a lot of the virtual stuff, and that stuff's been amazing to be able to do. Whether it's a drive-by visit. I mean, don't you love seeing dogs with their little heads in the window of a car? Like it's still very powerful. So maybe I can't touch the dog like I want to, but to still be able to see them, or to do the computer visits, or having programs or ways that you can interact that are not, or just using this time. Maybe this is the time that your dog can learn new things, that your dog is, hey, we're interested in reading programs, and maybe we can work on that for the next couple months until our dog's
Yeah.
able to get back in the library. So there's definitely a problem solving opportunity there to do things, kind of make lemonade out of lemons, I guess.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and it's a good reminder for us too, because as much as we all love animals, there is a human on the other end of the leash, and there's someone who's initiating these visits and these programs, and that's you guys as handlers. And so even when you might feel, man, it's disappointing to just walk by a window or to send an email with a cute picture, a lot of that, I would imagine, is the fact that you still care, and that you are someone who, whether or not you can come and visit in person, you're still concerned about the people who you serve. So it's been really moving to me to witness, and I know that a lot of the other leaders in the field are also just feeling really affirmed to know that this is the community that we're in, of people whose hearts are this big for this work. So thank you for that word of encouragement. I see, again, just more comments coming in of people who can relate and have said that their animals have stood by them during this time. and they've really enjoyed hearing about your program and about all that you bring to the field today. So I think that's it. No questions have come in. I thank you so much for your time. This has been good for the heart, and I've learned everyone who's joining us. Be sure to check out on in the comments. We're linking to the programs that Amy's talked about today. So any last words of goodbye for the crowd today, Amy?
Oh, I am just so thankful that for coming and not making me talk by myself with I love Taylor, we were talking earlier about just what a good group of people, what a friendly and what a loving and embracing warm community that you have, and I am just super excited that I got an opportunity to spend it with you.
Yes.
So thank you.